All right, I'll start with my name. Again, my name is Rob Scheer, R-O-B-S-C-H-E-R-E-R. I'm a sergeant with the Phoenix Police Department's Public Affairs Bureau. As you've been told, we're here at the scene of an officer-involved shooting. As in with all of these, this is going to be an extended period of time for this investigation to commence. It's a pretty large scene within the apartment complex next to us. So just bear with us. I know it's going to bog down a lot with the residents inside this apartment complex, but bear with us time-wise. We'll fine-tooth comb this scene and we'll get everything we need, and then we'll be able to leave and let this residential area kind of return back to normal. I'll start at the very beginning from Phoenix's perspective. This incident began around 2:15 this afternoon when Phoenix police officers were called to a shots fired call in the area of 33rd Avenue and Northern. When officers arrived, they did locate an adult male victim with at least one gunshot wound. This man was subsequently transported to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced deceased. With some of the intelligence that officers obtained from this, from their original response, and homicide detectives responding to that scene, they were able to identify an adult male suspect and establish probable cause for this individual. In many of these cases, virtually all of them, when we identify a homicide suspect, our Tactical Support Bureau is going to take over kind of the tracking, locating, and arresting of these individuals. And that's what happened in this case. Elements of our Tactical Support Bureau were given this information of this adult male and ended up tracking him a little bit before 5 p.m. to the apartment complex near us here by 26th Avenue and Cactus Road. When elements of our Tactical Support Bureau, specifically our Special Assignments Unit, attempted to confront this individual, the individual pulled a handgun and fired multiple times at least one Special Assignments Unit operator, striking at least one Phoenix Police Department vehicle. At this point, our operator returned fire, striking the man and causing him to fall to the ground. This man was transported to a nearby hospital. He has since been pronounced deceased. And again, we're going to go through this scene. I believe the original scene that I spoke of, we're just about done, if not done, at that original homicide scene. Some of that information's now coming over here to kind of fill in some of the blanks that we have at this side. I can answer as many questions as I can about both incidents. Again, being that one of them, we're not even that far away from the original homicide, so they're both very young investigations. But I can give as much information as I can have.
So you got a call in from shots fired, and when your officers got to that first scene, they did find somebody with a gunshot wound. They were dead at that point?
They were transported to a nearby hospital before being pronounced deceased there.
And then the suspect allegedly fled here to this area, is what you're saying?
Right. Now there's a time frame in between there, whether he fled specifically here directly from that scene. What I can tell you is we tracked him here, and that was shortly before, say 5 p.m., right around maybe 4:45 is when the confrontation happened between our SAU operators and the man here.
Any indication that the suspect and that first initial victim knew each other?
They're going to work on that relationship. I don't have specifics on that, but yeah, that's obviously in every homicide, that relationship's going to be something that we're going to delve into as investigators, and that's something that our homicide investigators will do.
Do you have age and gender that you know?
I don't right now. All I can say is adult male. I will through a media advisory, and I'll probably split the media advisories just so it's not confusing on victim, suspect, and that type of relationship, the way we kind of do our media advisories. So when I kick the one out for 33rd and Northern, if at that point notifications have been done, I'll give the information reference the victim, and then obviously the man here. Once we're at a point where we can give that information out, I will also do that through media advisory.
What was the motive for the individual to shoot at the victim?
Of the original homicide?
Yeah.
That's something that will also go into their relationship. If there was a relationship, if there wasn't, trying to figure out that motive is obviously an imperative part of all of our homicide cases. So that's something our homicide investigators will look into.
And can you remind me the location for that first scene?
The first one was right around 33rd Avenue and Northern Avenue.
Both men, the suspect and the victim at that original homicide scene who died?
Yes, yeah, they're both adult males.
Did the suspect try to harm anybody at this location before they were shot?
Not that we know of, not that I've been told specifically, as far as while he was being tracked here. Obviously, he did shoot at one of our officers, so there was an attempt to harm, our operator. But any of the residents here or anything like that, I haven't been told of any of that being the case.
Any reason why he would come to this location? Did he live here? Anything you can say about that?
I don't know specific residency for this individual yet, or if it's not his residence, what his connection is here. But again, that is definitely something they will, our homicide investigators, transitioned from the earlier scene over here. So it's the same group of detectives that are working both cases just to kind of keep that information, because it's all going to end up being related, through this individual. Whether he's a resident here, I don't have that, but we'll try to tie him if we can. It might have just been the place he pulled off to.
Were both the initial homicide and then this officer-involved shooting, they both happened outdoors?
I'm not positive on I believe so, that the homicide was outdoors. It was near an apartment complex there, and within the complex, but I believe it was outside also. This confrontation at this apartment complex was outside, not within a residence.
Did you say he had fired one shot at officers when they first got here, or were there multiple?
When he fired multiple times.
And he fired first?
Yes.
Okay, on officers, how many do you think responded?
How many officers responded? With gunfire?
Well, first, just how many were here on scene, because you were tracking the homicide suspect
Yeah,
here.
so in that circumstance, it wasn't just our special assignments unit. It was many levels of our tactical support bureau. We had sufficient resources in this apartment complex at that time, which is something before they make the call to go effect an arrest of somebody. They're going to ensure that, especially when they're doing it inside of a multi-residential area such as a apartment complex, they're going to make sure the individual A is in an area where no one else is at, preferably, and B is in an area that they can kind of stop any outward movement if they decide to run or get away, or bring lethal confrontation towards us. They're going to make it as safe as possible. That's what our special assignments unit did here, and they had sufficient personnel. Once the call goes out of an officer-involved shooting, there's a lot of marked personnel and unmarked personnel that are heading this way, and that's just the nature of what we do in all those circumstances.
And were any officers hit?
No, there were no officers injured during this incident.
Any attempt to save the suspect's life after shots were fired?
Yes, so part of our special assignments unit are trained EMTs, trained medical staff, and they have their equipment. I don't know specifically what part of that training, or if there was an EMT certified individual or operator on scene at this one. But yes, medical aid was attempted, and again, he was transported to a nearby hospital before being pronounced deceased.
Up to date, how many officer-involved shootings have happened within the department?
This year?
This year, yeah.
This is our 8th.
And I don't know if you answered this question, you kind of asked it yourself. How many officers returned fire onto the suspect here?
At this point, we have one shooter.
One
officer? One officer,
one
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Just to make, also just on that 8, this is our 6th where Phoenix police officers have been fired upon by the individual also, which I know 8 comparatively to last year we're below numbers right now, but I think a number that kind of speaks to what our officers are dealing with, day in and day out is we're being fired upon, in the vast majority of these incidents. So.
And I know a lot of us weren't able to go inside. Just kind of walk us through, visually of what's happening inside. Did any, police vehicles get struck by shots from the suspect? Kind of what's going on the inside?
Yes, so we did have one unmarked police vehicle that contained the officer that was being shot at. It was struck by gunfire when the man was shooting at this operator. And it's in an open kind of area of the parking lot is where the original confrontation or original attempt to detain or arrest that individual happened. It did move a little bit out of the parking lot after the exchange of gunfire before the man fell to the ground. But it wasn't in, he ended up kind of near apartment complex, near some residents, but the original confrontation wasn't in that manner, which again goes into, why these SOU, these special assignment units operators, when they call to go make an arrest, that's all something they take into account for.
And that officer was inside his vehicle. Was he still like approaching when he got fired upon, or was he standing outside of his car? Do you know that?
He started inside and then obviously exited, at which point, the exchange of gunfire occurred.
We got a tip that there was also some sort of SWAT situation earlier this morning in a neighborhood near 40th Drive in Northern. Is that related to the incident at 33rd where that initial homicide happened, or could you confirm that at all?
No, I don't think that's related. That's actually, that's our partners with Glendale Police Department served that search warrant. And that was, I believe, around 5 o'clock this morning. I don't believe that's going to be related in any way, shape, or form to this homicide or this incident.
And how is that officer that was shot at, how are they doing tonight?
They're, as far as I know, they're as well as could be expected. Obviously, anytime you're in a critical incident like this, more or less one where someone's shooting at you, you're going to have waves of emotion that are going to come through you. We do have our employee assistance unit that comes to every one of our officer-involved shootings, and it's an imperative piece of this puzzle that we bring to this, and it speaks to kind of advancements with our department. They're a huge piece. Multiple members of our employee assistance unit are here, and they're here to simply assist those officers, not just the one involved, but his partners once it went to the scene afterwards. Anybody that's here and part of this, they're here for us. And that's a huge part of these critical incidents for our officers.
You don't believe there was another individual involved in the previous shooting besides the person that ended up here? Is there any outstanding suspects for the original case at this time that you know of?
No, at this point, at least from our initial, scene investigation at 33rd Northern, and other witness elements from there, we believe there's only going to be one suspect there, and that's going to be the same individual that was involved here, and no other suspects relative to this scene. Okay, anything else I have? Again, any other updates, I'll kick through a media advisory. I expect it to be split just to make sense in my head, just so it doesn't tie in a ton. Obviously, you guys will know they're tied together, and I'll try to release them around the same time just to make it easy on everybody, but I'll split those two, and when I can make notifications of names and things like that, I'll do exactly that.
Do you think you'll have those out before 10 tonight?
I might be able to release the victim's name from 33rd Northern, potentially by then.
The victim who died?
The victim, yeah. Not the individual that was involved in the shooting. I won't be able to release that tonight. I can say that. Good. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much.